Hello, my name is Hugo and welcome to Hugo's Desk. I have a small intro for the video that you're about to watch, and I understand that it is very long. It's almost 2 hours long. But this is a talk. I just wanted to give a little intro before you watch it. This was a talk I was invited by Cave Academy with the collaboration of the Visual Effects Society to be part of a panel. And this panel was all about developing as an artist. And we had some fantastic artists on this panel. I was joined by Paul, Lucy from DNeg, Ben from Unity, and of course Jay from Cave Academy. The talk is mostly divided by two parts. The first hour we talk a lot about developing as an artist, and the second half, about 1 hour in, then we answer questions from the audience. And I really enjoyed it. It was really fun. We talked about plans for the future. We talked about failure. We talk about that a lot. We talked about if artists should leave their home countries or not. We talked about COVID-19 and all the implications that it has right now. We spoke about inspiration. We talked about, very importantly, about being software agnostic, how to deal with directors, and of course with very vague comments and feedback. We spoke about working remotely. We spoke about depression and anxiety. We talked about the balance between life and work. Physical problems because of working too long, back pain, sciatica problems, embracing new technology. It was a really, really fun panel. I really enjoyed it, and that's why I've included the whole thing here. I know it's long, but, you can always find the chapters. They can be found on the timeline or on the description on the video, so you can always jump from topic to topic if you wish. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did as well. And it goes without saying that I would love to, thank Jay from Cave Academy for inviting me. It was wonderful. I would love to thank the speakers in the panel as well, and the audience. The audience gave some amazing questions as well, and the Visual Effects Society, of course, for supporting this talk. Now, don't forget, if you are one of my Patreons, at the end of the video, your credits will be there. So go and check your name if you're supporting my channel. And of course, thank you so much for supporting Hugo's Desk. Don't forget as well that I have a second YouTube channel, Hugo's Desk Live. This channel is completely dedicated just to my streams on Twitch. And if you're not a Patreon, don't forget that you can always support my channel, both Hugo's Desk and Hugo's Desk Live on Patreon. Anyway, I'm talking for too long already. So let's just get going with the talk. This is Developing as an Artist from Cave Academy and the Visual Effects Society. Enjoy.
We are good to go, I think. We've got everyone here. I was going to just start with, if everyone's good, to just do a quick introduction of what they do, their current role. And then maybe after that, we can just dive in and start talking about your kind of journey to where you are now. Because I've been speaking to a couple of you and kind of where you started 5, 10, 15 years ago to what you're doing at the minute, if that sounds good. I'll point the finger, pause in my left top corner. So you have this start?
Well, my name's Paul Mellender. I'm an artist. I currently work contract in film, television, video games, scientific visualization, publishing, marketing, you name it. In the last couple of years, I've worked on about 40 shows, maybe a little bit more than that, including Bly Manor, Lock and Key, Queen's Gambit, doing concept stuff, creature designs, environments, you name it. I tend to be a little restless with things. So I started out as a traditional artist, which I still fall back on whenever I can, and started in digital right around 2002, and got my first art direction job in 2006 on a film, and didn't look back from there. Been steadily working in film and video games largely, and aside from that, I'm not sure what else to tell.
Lucy, are you good to go next?
I'm just fine to go, thanks, Jay. So I'm one of the artist managers at DNeg in London, and I've been doing that role for about 6 years. The artist manager role is all about the career development of the team. So it's about trying to build a really good, strong team and then helping them progress once they're in the company. But I have an artist background myself, so I spent about 9 years doing look dev, lighting, shader writing, that side of things.
Cool. Thank you, Lucy. And Hugo, if you're happy to go.
Yeah, I'm happy, of course. Thank you so much first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's really great to be this panel and to have the company of such talented people with me here. So my name is Hugo Guerra. I'm Portuguese born, and I've been working in the industry for about 20 years. And I've worked on many different places. I've worked in Portugal, in Sweden, and in Britain as well. I've been in the UK for the last 12 years. I'm not going to bore you with my entire portfolio, but like I've first started as an artist. Like I have an art degree, a fine art degree. Started as a video artist and did a lot of short films. And then I kind of moved on because I had to pay the bills. I kind of moved on to working with After Effects and doing some motion graphics. And then I became an art director on companies in Sweden, and then moved on to London. Then eventually I became a VFX supervisor, and then worked as a senior composer at Nexus. And then I stayed at the mill for quite a long time. I was the head of nuke compositing at the mill for 5 years. And then I was a VFX supervisor for the last year of those 5 years. In the meantime, I left the mill, and I've opened my own company. My company, which is called the VFX Bureau. And also my YouTube channel as well. This was about 5 years ago where I opened my company, and also I opened my YouTube channel. So I split my time between working on my VFX company, and I do everything from being on set to supervise to doing commercials. But especially lately, I've been working mostly directing and supervising video game trailers and video game in cinematics for in-game cinematics as well. I've done a lot of games for Ubisoft, for Activision, for Dambusters, for a lot of people. At the side, I have like a second life as a teacher. So I've been teaching for like 10 years in universities. I've been teaching at the National Television School, been teaching at the Campus I-12, been teaching at FX PhD, and also my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is called Hugo's Desk. I have 2 YouTube channels, Hugo's Desk and Hugo's Desk Live. And currently, I am working, like right now, I'm directing a game cinematic for a AAA game for Rebellion Games here in Britain. And that's kind of like the short version. Yeah, here in Britain. I'm in Britain, yes.
Oh, no, I'm at Rebellion at the minute.
Oh, you're at Rebellion right now?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm working on a game which I cannot tell anyone, otherwise I would have to kill all 87 people that are alive right now. And so I'm working in a AAA game. I was just there at Rebellion a few months ago, filming on their mocap studio and everything for that trailer. So that's my life in a short way. So that's it, yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Hugo. And Ben, if you're happy to...
Hi, I'm Ben Radcliffe. I, like Hugo, I have a fine art degree. I started off in doing aerospace industry, doing visualization, but I went to school for animation. The first animation stuff I worked on was VeggieTales back in the day. Then I went on, I was doing assets, look dev, lighting, compositing. And then I went on to work at DreamWorks. I worked at Disney Feature Animation. Then I spent about 8 years in Beijing and Singapore as an overseas CG supervisor, doing all kinds of crazy location-based entertainment, episodic animation, Star Wars: The Clone Wars. And then when that series ended, I transitioned over to Industrial Light and Magic. And I actually moved to London about 6 years ago to work on The Jungle Book at MPC. And then I went back to ILM London. And then about 2 years ago, I left and I joined Unity Technologies, which makes a game engine. So I'm a technical specialist, a senior technical specialist for media entertainment. But basically, I work with all kinds of animation, creative studios, advertising agencies of how they can take all the cool game disruptive technologies, AR, VR, cloud, real time, and integrate that into their pipelines to tell richer and more compelling stories. And that's what I'm doing now.
Cool. Thanks very much, everyone. So, I mean, this doesn't lead on to my next question, but I think it follows on well. You've all kind of had a bit of different jobs, essentially different roles as you progress from when you started to where you are now. Are you where you intended to be, let's say 5-10 years ago? So when you look back and you go, you know what I want to do in 10 years time, are you doing that? Or have you found things have just worked in a way that you're happy with what you're doing, but it isn't maybe what you were thinking 15 years ago?
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting question because I had no plans of what I'm doing right now. I guess maybe it's me. Like my life usually it tends to be a bit chaotic anyway. But I couldn't really do a plan, to be honest. Like when I was a teenager, I bought, like, my mother gave me a video camera, and I started filming things and doing short films and video arts and all sorts of things. And I thought, oh, I'm going to be a director. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to direct films and be really famous and win an Oscar and everything. That never happened, of course, because that's incredibly hard. And I was in Portugal in Lisbon, so that would never happen. But I guess it kind of like, I kind of leave my life where it leads, so I kind of like keep going and keep doing things and see where they end up. For a long time, I've kind of discovered that making plans doesn't really work out that well. And I try to just be honest and try to just keep pushing forward with my art and my work and trying to be honest and, of course, earning money to have a living, and that's kind of my plan. I really don't have a major plan for the next 5-10 years. I'll just see where things are. I don't know if it's because of luck or because of just the industry or something, but I've always kind of work always have found me. I kind of like by sheer luck or contacts or people that I knew, I kind of got that job, and then I got that job, and then I got that job, and it kind of always worked that way. So for all of you listening, sometimes, at least for me personally, this is just my personal opinion, of course. I just feel that planning too much might not work. I think you just have to see how it goes and try to work on things you love and try to keep going as an artist and developing and see where it lands. And once you are there and you're confident, then you can try stuff and you can try new things. And really, I think everyone in this call should be really taking to heart that failure will happen, and I have failed many times in my career, in my life, and failure is just part of being an artist. I think we fail all the time, and that's why that's actually good. You fail so that you can become better, and then you do something else. So yeah, that's kind of at least my opinion in my personal view.
I just want to jump on. No, I just want to jump on. I think you hit on an important point. Adaptability in this ever-changing industry and these ever-changing times is something you just touched upon, and I think that's something important. Sorry, go ahead, Paul.
Well, I was going to say for me, it's fallen to the man plans, God laughs thing.
Yeah.
So where I've run into it is I had no idea 15 years ago that I would be doing contract stuff like this. I did very different contract stuff then. The industry changes so fast, technology changes so fast, definitions are so in flux. I'm not sure that like planning on a career or even adding a name to a thing really means much at the present. So I had no idea. Like a thing I try to do now is keep an eye on what interesting things are popping up in the world and what I'd like to chase, as opposed to thinking there's an end endeavor that I'm going to, fall into and it's going to be my retirement, So I'd say that yeah, it is, and I agree with Hugo on there is failure. One of the things to almost not get used to, fight against it as much as you can, but buttress yourself for successes, failures, feast, famine, the unexpected in both directions. When I first got my start in films, I wasn't working in films at all. I had heard from a producer who had seen some of my work, randomly on some forum and was like, hey, you want to do this? And I'm like, let's give it a go. I know nothing about that. Of course I'll jump in and do something I don't know how to do. So
sounds so familiar. Sounds so familiar.
But there is a thing with that. Like maybe this was also implied in Hugo's thing. I'm always honest about that too. Whenever I go into work of any kind, it's like, hey, here's my knowledge base. I'm not going to lie to you and go, yes, I know how to do this. I'm brilliant. It's like I can do everything. Can't. But I'll give it a go. I'll jump in and I will earnestly try. But again, that's where a lot of the failures come in, and you have to be honest enough and have a brave enough chin to be able to walk in and go, hey guys, I'm failing. I need help. I need, you know, I need to discuss this with you. And that I find helps when you collaborate. It actually helps mediate failure. So yeah.
Now, as an artist, I think I didn't have a clear picture of where I wanted to go. I started down the shader writing route, so I was quite technical, moved around a fair bit, kind of took the opportunities that I was given, went onto the shows I was put onto. And I think a key turning point for me was when I realized that it was better to do something that I enjoyed rather than something that I thought would get me where I needed to go. So I remember I was doing quite a technical role. I was offered a more technical role. And I looked around me at some of the people who were enjoying their jobs the most, and they weren't in technical roles. And I thought, you know what? Actually, I'd rather be happy doing what I'm doing. So I spoke to my manager about it, and he put me in a different type of role. And that was such a turning point. And from there, I actually had far more success than I expected to have. And then the artist management thing came up, and that took me down a completely different path that I hadn't expected. And so I think you're absolutely right, guys. You never know what's around. But if you work hard and you apply yourself with passion, you take the opportunities that come up, then hopefully you'll go in the right direction.
I guess I just wanted to add, in terms of, you're speaking a lot about failure, learning from failure. I guess the good thing about failure is it forces you to figure things out, would you say? Or, as an artist, you're going to have to hit a wall and then figure out a solution to overcome that.
Well, I think the adaptability, I think just jump in, I wanted to be a 2D animator at Disney, and, how is that now? It's like the world has changed so much. So, and I think I wanted to draw 2D, and then that went away and the 3D boom hit. And then I found I really have a passion for photography and pictures. So like Lucy said, it's really about adapting and finding your passion and where you want to go. And that's when you find what you're really passionate about, that's when you're going to have your success. You come up with this plan, like I want to do X, Y, and Z. And then you discover, maybe I'm not too into that. Like I'm not a very good animator, and I'm not much about performance and timing. And it's really about pictures and, what I liked about drawing then translated into something else. So it's, again, just adapting and navigating that river and finding your place and what you're mostly passionate about. And half the jobs that don't even exist yet for, there's going to be new jobs every year. I have friends who are passionate about grooming, and that didn't exist 10 years ago.
Would you guys say that one of the things that allows you to move forward is actually having, kind of based on failures or lessons learned, seasoning, you have a dynamic toolkit? Dynamic toolkits around how to organize what you're going to do, how to prepare things, how to approach things, as opposed to it's like, I want to be a thing that I figured out the definition for, as opposed to going, I'm not sure of the definitions, but I've got some pretty sturdy tools I can rely on and some knowledge that I can base some confidence in. Do you find that that's the case?
Yeah, I think everything builds off every experience builds off and you learn and you grow. And I think that, like I was saying, I started off doing visualization, and then I find a passion for lighting, and I learned about that through this rigorous Karate Kid thing. And then you just kind of grow and you build upon each experience, and it gives you more opportunities from there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think, to your point, Paul, and also Ben, people tend to forget. I have this struggle with my students all the time because they're so young and they are so clickbaited, So they tend to forget that software is not the answer at all. And people get really attached to software, and they get really attached to programs and get really attached to things. And I keep hammering this idea that you need to be completely agnostic. You need to believe on everything, and everything has to work. And as long as you learn the core skills that you should, and I know this is repeated on every talk you see, but people just don't really listen, You need to understand that you need to learn photography, lighting, composition, color theory, have good references in film, know exactly what the language of movies is, language of cinema, the language of games, the language of 3D, depending on where you're working, or design or motion graphics. But as an artist, if you learn composition, color, and light, for example, imagine you're a CG artist. If you really, really learn photography, I'm not talking about using your iPhone. I'm talking about learning photography, like learning photography, learning composition and lighting. If you do that, I can guarantee you, because I can vouch for that. I've seen this happen. Can guarantee you that you can become good at Maya, Houdini, 3D Studio Max. You can become at anything as long as you just practice the buttons, you know? And this is the core thing. Be software agnostic, and those tool sets, the tool sets are not about the software. The tool sets are the knowledge itself. And this is true to a lot of artists I know, very senior artists, and it's true even to my career as well, because I have the basis of photography, lighting, and color that I've learned on my art school. And obviously, I'm not saying that everyone should go to art school. Of course not. But what I'm saying is back then, when it was the 90s, that was the only way to learn this. And so I went to art school. And those kind of things stick with me forever. What didn't stick was when I learned After Effects 2 at the school, or that I learned Premiere 1.5. No, I don't.
I was thinking Shake. I put a lot of effort into Shake and Softimage.
Exactly. But you see, Shake, Fusion, Nuke, whatever the hell it is, it someday will be called Fandango 2000, and then that will come in. And right now it's Epic, and it's Unreal. Everyone is like, oh my god, Unreal.
And Unity.
Yeah, in Unity, I know. but what I mean is, like, everyone is like obsessed with this thing. Oh, it's just going to replace everything. No, it's not going to replace anything. As long as you know lighting, as long as you know photography, as long as you know the core skills, you won't be replaced. You just have to move on to the next software and just learn another one. Be software agnostic. For God's sake, I'm not even religious and I'm saying this. For God's sake, just be software agnostic, you know?
But what you said about the fundamental skills, and I always tell this story, is I was on a virtual production shoot and the director was having a nervous breakdown. She's like, if someone else says field of view, I'm going to flip out. Just give me a 50 millimeter lens. That's all I want. Stop asking me what the FOV is.
I know. You run into a thing, and if you don't mind a small anecdote, I was with a company, and we were doing one of our mentoring sessions where we draw, and we were going through the traditional basics a little bit, and I was showing how you can quickly do a line, get motion flow, and also get a basis of anatomy all in one quick line. So I showed it real quick, and these two guys, not to hassle them, but it showed some of the superstitious thinking that you're kind of talking about with tools. I showed them the line. They said, do that again. And I did it again. They said, how did you do that? And I'm like, do which? How did you get your pencil to do that? And I'm like, my pencil? And they're like, how'd you get your pencil to make that arm? It's not in the pencil. I'm not shaking the pencil and an arm comes out. It's like, and it took them a minute. And these guys were bright. I mean, it sounds silly, but it took them a minute, and they had a cognitive dissonance where they were like, oh yeah. And I think that comes up with software, like it's a magical savior that if I learn this software, the stars are going to open and I'm going to see the secret revelations and all my dreams will come true. It's like, no. It's knowledge, and it's still the same hard work it's always been. You know, the same efforts. You know, there's not a cure to be found in software. It's a great tool. Tools are tools. You know. So yeah, sorry about the anecdote.
No, it was great.
Yeah, I guess yeah. I mean, I do a lot of teaching, and they're a little thrown when, before you do the lesson on Substance Painter, you just spend an hour talking about materials and how the real world works, how light and matter works. And before you do modeling and sculpting, it's all anatomy. And there'll be a number of students who will say, when do we get to using brush? And it's like, well, that doesn't. You know, we'll get to that when we need to get to it. But if you haven't got a clue where the clavicle starts and ends, then we're going to have big problems later on. So I guess, I mean, that was one of the questions, was how can artists develop their skills? But I guess what you're all saying essentially is you got to go back to the fundamentals, to the basics of how the real world works, and then put that into any application.
I'd also say that whenever the question comes up, and I get this quite a bit, I do a lot of side mentoring, and I get the question a lot, do I have to learn everything? You know, the question is, what don't you have to learn? I can't think of a thing. You have to learn everything. That, you know, if we're making worlds, we have to understand worlds, and that means every part. We have to be thorough. And so it's like, and also not wanting to jump to the end. It's like, well, when do I get to leap before I look? You know?
Oh, don't get, oh man, like, don't, yeah. Don't get me started on that one. Like I always get the answer like from someone, "Oh, you're a VFX supervisor. How do I become a VFX supervisor? Can I have a degree on that? Is there a course? Are you going to make a course about it?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not going to make a course unless we can all go on set on like a day trip."
Yeah.
I'm not going to make a course about VFX supervision, because unless we are all on set, like all 50 of us, and we're like there watching how it's done, you're never going to really fully understand this. Like, yeah, I think there's a lot of misconceptions, and it's really true what you said there, like about building worlds and knowing really what the worlds are. And I would even go one step further. People always forget. We kind of live on an age in CG and VFX. We live like on the romantic age, you know, like we're like the romantics, you know, struggling to get photoreal and struggling to make it all very beautiful and all very pretty and oh my God, it's so real, so real, so real. But we always forget that what was real like 10 years ago is not real anymore. And then 10 years from now, it won't be real again. And we're kind of stuck on this romantic notion of, you know, 17th century portrait painting, you know, like we're kind of like stuck there. And I feel like it would be nice if we also kind of evolved and also go through the struggles that art also had. You know, art kind of evolved from photography into abstractionism. It evolved to cubism. It evolved to modern art. It evolved to all sorts of things. And I kind of feel like video games and CG and VFX are kind of stuck on this absolute obsession with photorealism. And I understand what we're trying to do, and I understand that we have to get to photorealism before we deconstruct it, but let's not forget that deconstructing it also is very important if we want to like move this art forward, you know, like which is an art, you know, especially video games and especially films. I would even go more far, like for me, video games are like the opera of our time, you know, like they have every single permutation of art merged into one, where you have like screenwriting and you have music and you have like everything. But I'm going off topic, but I'm just like keeping people conscious that there are artistic things that they can also learn to deconstruct what they've learned, and not be too obsessed on either with software, but also not too obsessed with photorealism as well, because there are a lot of other avenues and a lot of other things that we can do as artists. And of course, I'm talking about art, not really like just a commercial that we're doing. Obviously, if I'm making like a commercial for potato chips, I'm not going to make it in an artistic way. Obviously, that is a bit of a different conversation, of course.
And I guess it kind of all leads to, you know, art and story, I guess, in terms of what you're doing is all about selling the story. So I guess if it is a realistic looking story, that's the aim. But if it's a stylized piece of work, it's going to come down to selling the story with, you know, whatever the vision of the director or the filmmakers are. Would you say students or professionals think about that enough in their work as they're developing their piece of work, or are they just doing a standalone model turntable or a standalone, you know, here's some daylight coming in?
They don't.
I tend to think that there is a lot of freestanding brands and products. Like I notice a lot of imitation in young artists, especially. It's like they have an idea of what this product looks like, and they want to reproduce and be associated with that named thing that already exists, instead of thinking of themselves again as world makers and pioneers and going, yeah, you call me a this, or your name for it is this, and that's fine. I understand there's reasons for that. But what I really do is far more expansive, and I'm going to be pushing every boundary and testing every boundary and violating a number of boundaries, because what I do is build worlds, you know. So I think there is a thing, it's reactionary. It's looking backward and saying, this is the standard. This is what we have to be looking at, where it's like, no, the road is forward, you know, and if there's no road, you're going to have to carve that out. So, you know, I think there is a situation of wanting a favorite product, and then how do I get to DIY my own favorite product? And that's being an artist or making a comic or doing a thing, instead of going, they made comics, they made movies, they made games. I want to go to a place. I want to be a tourist in a fantasy world or a place in time and history, and I want it tangible. I want as much of that as I can get. These are great tools. How do I get there? And I think that's more of what an artist actually is like, I'm trying to make and manifest a place that I don't get to go to unless I do this. Instead of like, I like drawings. It's like, drawings are good. It's good to like drawings, but that's not the end part, and it's not the end goal, I don't think.
I think one of the first challenges an artist has when they join an industry and a company is getting creative notes in a daily session and then needing to respond to them. You might have somebody who's trained up to do effects skills, and they know that there's physical principles that they need to stick to, rules of gravity, all the technical stuff. But if they get a note in a shot saying, oh, I want it to be a bit more like this, I want it to be fitting in with the sequence, this lighting, this whatever, I think that's a real different challenge. And I don't know if Hugo or Ben, you've had that situation where you've been giving notes in dailies and you're trying to help artists understand how to get what you're talking about, because it didn't come naturally to me. Going into a daily session and trying to see what the VFX suit saw, I didn't always see it. It was quite a challenge.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. And I worked in Asia a lot and having to communicate those ideas. And an example would be is when you have a specific style in a specific world, like Clone Wars had a very stylized look that they want for like no specular highlights. And we have a team of junior artists who all want to make everything shiny. And it's how do you communicate? How do you get people to understand the notes and hit the notes without breaking their spirit, without telling them they can't put any of their own magic into it? It's a very challenging thing. And I think that's something you have to learn is, one, it's a service industry. You're making, in some cases, like at a Disney or DreamWorks, you're making a product for them, and it's someone else's vision, and everything is in support of that director or art director's vision. So you have to do things in your style while also trying to bring a little bit of yourself to it. It's a challenge, and it's always a balance. I don't have an answer of how to do that, but that's something you like you said, it's something as you grow with experience and you learn yourself, and then you have to pass it on to the next generation.
I completely agree with you, and it's excellent point, Lucy. You have really an excellent point there. I'm glad you've brought that up because I've been on both sides. I've been a supervisor and I've been a director, so I've been on the side where I'm trying to figure out what's going on, and I've been on the side where I'm trying to explain what I want. And I feel like this is one of the big, again, going back to I know I'm like a broken record, going back to the skill sets. Not only composition, photography, lighting, and all those kind of things that I'm always repeating, but also communicating. And people have very difficult time communicating. People have difficulty on writing an email. People have difficulty on understanding notes. They have difficulty understanding feedback. And sometimes they especially have difficulty on understanding abstract thoughts. When you're saying something like, well, this shot needs to be more beautiful, or it needs to be more warm, or it needs to be more inspirational. All those things are important, and they are easy to understand if you know the language, and if you've understood art, and if you've studied art a bit, and if you've learned some artists, you kind of start getting those kind of notions, and then maybe you can communicate better with the director and communicate better with an artistic person, because obviously when you're dealing with directors and you're dealing with art, with clients, not talking much about agencies, but especially directors, they are not technical, they are not technical people. They don't really know exactly the nuts and bolts, and sometimes they're addressing or giving a feedback of something that maybe even is not possible, or maybe it's too expensive, or maybe it's something that is not a good idea. And it's kind of your role as an artist to kind of like help the vision of the project and try to totally understand what they're trying to go for when they start saying it needs to be more warm, or it needs to have more a morning feeling. Because, and I think that is I desperately have that struggle with artists. Even when I was at the mill as a head of department, I had a huge struggle where I had people that were too technical and people that were too artistic. And there's something in the middle here, like you need to kind of find a balance. You need to find a way to be technical, but not too technical, because otherwise you won't even be able to communicate, But you need to be artistic, but not too artistic. Otherwise, no one can even pick up your shots or even pick up anything you've done. So it's something in between. You have to have both worlds, both sides of the brain, and start. If you have one side more developed, I would advise all 100 people here, if you are too technical, you should right away start learning more artistic stuff. And if you're too artistic, you should right away start learning more technical stuff. You'll never learn both. I can tell you that. I don't know both. I will never know both. But I've tried my best to be more technical because I feel like I'm a bit too artistic sometimes. And so I try to study color theory. I try to study equations. I try to study Python. I try to study certain things that are far beyond my brain because I'm a bit stupid. So I can't really learn all of them. But I don't need to learn them all. I just need to know enough to compensate and to complement what I know from an artistic point of view. And the same goes for a technical person. If the person is very technical, they need to know enough of artistic language to at least be able to do their job. Because it's pointless if you're too technical. It's absolutely pointless if you get stuck with like, oh, it's not physically accurate. Because we don't really care if it's physically accurate or not. We care if it's a beautiful image. And I think sometimes people forget that, you know. And I apologize, I'm talking too long. Sorry.
No, but that's a thing important. I'm sorry, this is cathartic. I'm having flashbacks. But I think that's like when I worked in Singapore, that was the thing, like giving notes. You had to find a balance to give notes that weren't literal. You couldn't say, make it half as bright because someone had literally times 0.5 in the, you know, in intensity. So, you know, that was the thing we always would say is, you know, you have to interpret it in the best intention of the note. Like you have to do in the best spirit. And we couldn't give people instructions, but we had to kind of teach them to understand so they could interpret and, you know, add their own sensibilities to it themselves.
Right, but I guess one of the best ways to possibly do that is actually, you know, because I found when I was at, say, DNeg, I would sit with the technical people and kind of just show them what the artist wanted sometimes. Is everyone frozen except me?
No, you're frozen.
I think you are frozen.
And then I'm thinking, sorry, another cathartic thing. I'm working on a Michael Bay film. If anyone's worked on a Michael Bay film, that will break you forever. I think my favorite note from Bay was, "Who the fuck thought orange was a good color?"
Oh my god!
And that was the note was make it warmer.
I think I'm going to differ with everybody a little bit here. And
good,
or maybe
good. That's good.
Good.
When I was at Warner Brothers, I ran into a thing. I was art directing at the studio in Boston, and one of the first things, and I think what this describes is, and feel free to yell at me or punch me in the throat, that there's subservience and communication problems. Like one of the first things that we tried to do is set about what the language would be, and setting out boundaries and going, hey, pop is not a word. Epic does not count for anything, you know, or even, you know, who the fuck thought orange was a good idea. That's not an okay thing. You know, it's like you're not being clear and you're asking for somebody else to invent something based on your vagueness. Like if you're an art director, hopefully you're entrenched enough in the pipeline, or a VFX supervisor, or any of these roles that are information managers as much as anything else, you have to know how to communicate as part of being an information manager. And telling somebody, giving them vague notes without at least, and it took 12 weeks or so to walk the staff into the language, but also to get them up to date on current techniques. So there almost needs to be an expectation that because our industry is full of vague art terms, moving technical terms, moving software terms, you know, that there does need to be included in production the idea that, one, we need to get everybody on the same page. Again, ready, fire, aim is not the way to go. You have to, at the beginning, to direct a staff or direct information, you have to set the order, sequence, and alignments. And you have to inform the staff so that, like when you were mentioning that you don't get as one of the serving artists, you how to insert your own expertise or your own oomph. But an art director should, with his expert staff, you know, not look at them as service, but as experts. And that when they're configuring their direction for a project, ask the staff their expert opinion and advice with the framework that's coming, so that one, they're invested because they actually are using the best of their expertise in collaboration with the director, who can then codify and make conventions and, set the documentation from, New York, LA to China, or however the dispersal is going. So I think the responsibility lies in not trying to interpret a director who actually just wants you to build a product line like your Walmart and they're shopping for any vague thing, but to be responsible enough to say, hey, this information I'm giving, I've tried to sort it out as best I can. Here's our common language as far as I understand it. Let's build from there. So I think some of this is pointing out industry problems of not huge amounts of professional respect back and forth. And I could be wrong. I could be a bit.
No, I think it's very therapeutic as well. I think what you said, I actually had an incident this week with someone giving feedback when they said, I agree with you. You said you don't want to give literal things like do this, this, this. You want to let people interpret, but you also need to give them actionable feedback. Like who the fuck thought orange was a good color isn't actionable. Someone gave feedback this week on a project I'm on that says it looks low budget or it's uninspired. I'm like, how are they supposed to action on these things? These aren't valid feedback. You're not communicating what you want. You're just pooping on someone, right? So it's having that respect. And what you said is important because I think we've all experienced on some shows, like when I worked at Disney, the art directors were amazing and nurturing, and I, learned from them and I grew, but they were professionals. And then, I work on a Michael Bay show and I just, live in fear. But then again, that is a product, right? It's Transformers.
Well, I have to disagree. I will continue to disagree with this. Like, I not totally I disagree. Of course, I completely understand that sending a completely vague feedback is completely stupid. Of course it is. And I completely agree with what you're saying on that sense, Paul. And also with what you're saying, Ben, regarding Michael Bay's way of working, which you're not the first person to tell me that. Of people that friends that of mine that have worked with him. But I still think that we as an industry, yes, we do have a lot of problems, that you need to understand that it's really not going to change. Like, a lot of people are very artistic and a lot of directors are. I've worked with so many directors and it's very difficult to change them. And it's incredibly difficult to actually have them say what you're trying for them to say. They will always be a bit vague, and it's kind of like you kind of have to navigate and try to help as much as you can to try to get and interpret what they're trying to do. But I think this also, so in a way I agree and I disagree with you, because I feel like we can't go too far to a point that we just have to refuse vagueness, because vagueness is also good sometimes because it has part of inspiration and it's part of something that is a first reaction to something. If someone says it's low budget, I interpret that as a first reaction that this is a bit shit, and I completely think, okay, it's valid question. If they think it's looking bad, probably it is looking bad, and maybe we should reassess if it's actually looking good enough for the project that they're doing. Or maybe the fact is just that it is low budget, there's no money, and of course it will look low budget because there's no money. So that's another conversation that needs to happen as well. But I feel the industry sometimes is a bit too stuck on the pipeline, and I feel like, and I completely understand that things cost millions, and I've worked on multiple million-dollar big companies with huge productions, but I feel sometimes we get too stuck with the pipeline, and I really suffer with that. Like when we're working on, okay, now we're doing the storyboard, and now we're doing an animatic. Oh yeah, now we're gonna do a board-o-matic. Oh yes, now we're gonna do the layout. Oh yes, now we're gonna do lighting. Oh yes, now we're gonna do animation. All of this for me is completely counterproductive, and I feel for me like a lot of times things come up at the end, and a lot of times things come up because the images didn't work out as we planned. And I know that there's this obsession that we need to prep everything from the very beginning, and we need to make sure that if there is a change, it has to happen on the beginning, it has to happen on the storyboard level, otherwise we will never be able to change it. But I understand that those ramifications cost money, but you need to also understand the artistic side of it. Sometimes things change, and sometimes things evolve, and sometimes you change your mind, and sometimes something looks better. The experimentation factor sometimes is lost on the middle of this pipeline. And for me, like, this entire very secure way of working sometimes breaks certain projects, and I feel that a bit of chaos is also needed for things to look creative and to look interesting and to break the boundaries. And I feel like it would be nice if we had more flexibility in the industry. And in a way, I feel that's happening because we are having so many real-time engines and we're having so many technology advancements in terms of rendering time. And rendering time is not a problem like it used to be. And especially softwares are now very free. You know, like most people can get a software. Back in the day when I started, companies had their own softwares and no one else could have any kind of way around them, unless you were a runner or you were a junior inside the company, you could then have access to this software. So things are very democratic now and very open. But I wish that also we would have some time to think about the artistic side of it, because sometimes I feel like some productions that I've been involved are too conformed and they are too static, and they just lead to failure from a creative point of view. And we see that all the time in films and in games. Absolute failures from a creative point of view in certain films and in certain games. And I can guarantee that it is because of this strict way of working from stage to stage, department to department, that kind of makes all these departments islands, and they do not truly communicate between themselves to create something. And I understand the complexity of having hundreds of people communicating openly, but I feel that at least if we could achieve at least 10% of that chaos, it would help certain productions. And that's why I'm saying that I disagree a bit, because I feel like vagueness also helps to move artistic endeavors forward. That's at least my opinion. You know, don't want to sound like a douchebag, but that's how I feel after working for 20 years in like several productions. You know.
And I think you lead on to a good thing, though, Hugo, which is about pipeline and, again, departmentalization. And that leads to specialist versus generalist, where in terms of developing as an artist, when you're pigeonholed quite early and then you stay in that sort of role for 5-10 years, you have less of an appreciation and understanding of what other departments are doing. Have you found where people are just lighting or they are just animation, they don't quite understand the responsibilities of others, and therefore that essentially brings a project slightly into the wrong type of chaos? Because I guess generalists are flexible. When you do have that issue right at the end of the pipeline, they'd be able to jump in and pull loads of strings to get it working. But if it has to go through that linear pipeline and each department has to fix their problem, that just slows down the whole.
I don't want to spend too much time talking because I want other people to talk, so I'll be very brief. I definitely think this is a huge problem in the industry, absolutely. And I feel that people are too stuck on their own little computer with their headphones, just doing their own shot. And I feel like, and this is also sometimes the company's fault, of course, because there should be more openness on certain things to have more sharing between. And I understand that you can't just have meetings all the time, of course not. But having this feeling that we're all working on something together is fundamental for a company to have a good atmosphere and to build something and to especially create something nice. Because if everyone is just doing that little part like a cog in a machine, you're going to have an enormous amount of artistic creativity that will be just lost in the way. And not to mention, you lose artists. That's the problem as well. Like, because I left the mill because of this specific problem. I left the mill because it was a mill. It was a factory. And I felt like, no, I'm not a factory worker. I'm an artist. I want to work. And I'm going to open my little company. I have 2 people on my company. And that's it. And of course, I do shitty projects. And some of them are nice and some of them are good. And I will never earn an award ever again, like I did when I was at the mill. But that's fine. I'm absolutely happy with that because I'm now happy and I can work on more artistic things. I think that's the fundamental thing as well, that the industry is also losing talent because of this, because sometimes they forget that it's not all about technique. It's also about artistic visions as well. But I'll shut up now. Go for it.
I'd like to add something, if I may. I think you touched on a really important thing there, Hugo. It's about having respect for others. And I think if you put people into departments, there's a natural human inclination to go, oh, this is my team, and that's them. And this isn't us and them, and I'm going to look after my own. And I think what all companies and all people in this industry should be striving for in a perfect world is a team culture where they look out for each other, they help each other learn. And it's really interesting to see there's quite a lot of teachers on this call, and probably part of the reason we're here in this call, because we really enjoy seeing other people develop. And I think that's got to be at the root of any team and any successful company.
And here. Yeah, Yes.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, I think the shows I've been on that most successful are the ones that did the dailies together with other disciplines, where the lighters are with the animators together reviewing the sequence as a whole. I mean, some shows I worked on just had no dailies; they just fed you notes, and then like it's war, it's lighters versus compositors versus animators. But I think when you put people together and you see those problems, you can work together to solve them in the most efficient, creative manners and have a sense of teamwork, and the product is better.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Like the thing with that, when I left the mill 5 years ago and I started making my own productions, I kind of ranged from people having. I used to have like productions with two people, sometimes with 5, sometimes with 10, sometimes with 20. And I started doing something that I've never really did before, which was keynote presentations. And obviously this takes a lot of time and it's a lot of effort, but it was really, really worth it. Every time we had like, imagine we were about to send something to the client. We were doing this trailer and we had to send it to the client. I would do a keynote presentation, where I would gather all the turntables, I would gather all the light tests, I would gather all the latest renders, I would gather all the latest comps, and I would go through for usually they were about 5 minutes, sometimes it would be 10 minutes, and it would literally be like a presentation, like a regular keynote, welcome to this presentation about this project, and I would talk about the lighting department is doing this, and the compositing department is doing that, and here's the turntable of this, and I started shipping this to all the artists on the team, and also to my clients as well, like to agency, everyone. And everyone started loving this, and everyone just started like really starting to understand fully the production. And I understand that this is not possible on all productions, but I feel like as a supervisor, I felt like, okay, I want to share with everyone what we're doing and trying to accomplish together. It's going to take me like a whole day to gather all the stuff and to make a keynote and to like record my voice and get a microphone and do this and do that. But it was so worth it. And on every production I've done since, for the last 5 years, I've been doing this. And on every production I have, I usually end up with like 5 or 6 keynotes presentations that are shared with the clients, shared with my artists, shared with anyone involved in this production. And it really opened up both the artists because they kind of started understanding what other people were doing, but also especially my clients started understanding it in a different way. Because then they started seeing the amount of work that exists on something, And
but
instead
I guess it's
of
just keeping people in the loop.
People in the loop.
I think I've always appreciate that when especially other shows in big studios, you don't know what the other shows are doing, let alone your teams or your other departments. And I think like studios that always did monthlies that said, what are the other teams and the other shows working on? That I've always found that really rewarding.
Yeah.
One of the things I found to what Lucy was saying about the tribalism, basically, and the isolating groups, siloing and all that stuff, was that because I'm not a big fan of the idea of generalist specialists. There's been times I've been one or the other, in need. One of the things that I found is helpful to break out of that is to pair disciplines. It's like to pair groups together. Instead of having it be, I'm doing this, let me show you what I'm doing. When I was working in games, we did a thing where we'd pair QA people with an interest in art with an artist, a tech artist, a concept artist, and actually they would be a cluster group themselves who would, all of the Byzantine court titles got thrown out the window because everybody didn't know much about what anyone else was doing in terms of official stuff. They just knew they had an endeavor, and sharing an endeavor, they were then able to not have to be I made this title and I do this, this, and this, and here's my prestige. Not a generalist, not a specialist. What's your knowledge, Johnny? Johnny, what do you know? And then throw that in and mix and match as much as you can, because that's really, I think, what's going on. I really get rubbed raw by and to the assembly line idea, like being, I'm a specialist who works on only the front part of grooming, only front part of scalp grooming. That's what I do. And I grab it and I pass it on,
It's Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times, just like.
Yeah, these types of specialties are artificial. They really are a false prestige. They're false aristocracy.
Well, I was gonna say I'm working with a tech company now, which will drive you crazy because I'm working with software developers who develop tools, and then I'm like, but the artist works like this way. Well, they shouldn't work that way.
You're driving it wrong. Yes, you're driving it wrong. Okay, I get that all the time, man.
There was a tool that was developed in a couple of days once when I worked at DNeg. It took 2 days to build. It was an artist and a tech person together, and they built it in 2 days. And the reply was not ready yet because it needs to take longer than 2 days to build. And it was like, it does exactly what the tool needs to do. We had a criteria, we had a list, we got the people together who need to create the tool and use the tool, and they knocked it out. So you get a lot more done, I guess, when you are cross-pollinating different skills and almost bringing specialists together to make generalist bubbles.
I was in a specialist situation where they were using because things had become so specialized, everybody had a protected body of knowledge, that we were using super old software. No new innovations or R&D could be used because everybody was guarding. No, we'll break the whole system. 3 people will die if we do this, So it was like a setup that doing these, like diving so deep into specialty and actually just guarding your own safe haven of assembly line work, it caused a whole studio to have to repurchase an entire new studio. Basically, they had to upgrade everything once the whole system crashed because of guardianship, because of extreme specialty. Whereas, like, using specialty where specialty is needed by generalists, people who have mixed knowledge, you do get to cross over. It is part of being a specialist to know what your neighbor is doing. Also, to have generalist knowledge is also part of being a specialist, and hopefully vice versa. So whenever I see like a team that's a super specialist team, I always go, this is going to cost millions. This is dangerous. I'm not sure I want to join into this company.
I'm just gonna start asking you some of these questions in the Q&A, just so we can make sure we get them in.
Yes, let's do this.
Magdalena, who's saying, hello, I am a game and art design student. I'm looking for internships. Do you have any advice how to approach it during the COVID pandemic? It is so difficult to get anything currently.
Yeah, so I don't know, I can say just something briefly about this. So unfortunately, yes, COVID-19 has been affecting a lot of companies with juniors and internships, because obviously internships and juniors are something that have to be physical, really, to be honest. Like if they were like how we used to do them, of course, because you have to mentor people and you have to progress people. But you should really start researching, because I do know for a fact that there are several game companies that are now doing this finally. After we've been locked down for a year, some companies are now finally opening, just like VFX companies are doing as well. Like I know Framestar is doing, like I know DNeg is doing as well. Like there's a kind of companies that do that as well. But there's quite a lot of games companies now that are finally starting to try to bring in internships and try to do them through Zoom, try to do them remotely, try to kind of nurture some of that new talent coming in. But it is a bit slow, yes. And I wish that companies would push this harder, because it looks to me like we're going to stay like this for at least another year. And talent needs to grow, and they need to just come up with alternative methods. Otherwise, we're just going to have an industry of seniors and seniors and seniors. And then in 20 years, there won't be any seniors because they won't be there. So it is incredibly important for companies to do this, but just research on the websites, contact recruitment on these companies, on these game companies, contact directly and ask them, are you doing any kind of recruitment during COVID-19? If they say no, just move on to the next one. Try to contact a couple of 100 companies and see what they say. And by the way, never contact just 1 or 2, just contact 100. Like go for it, go completely mad. And because I know a lot of them are building new ways and new methods to bring in internships,
I'm not leaving. I was just cold.
Where are you going?
No, I'm just in
I would suggest a couple of things. One, I know that there are game companies doing even some remote internships. If you are looking like on LinkedIn or ArtStation or any of the job forum boards, I agree with Hugo. Try, spread out wide and far. But also, when you're looking at this, look at large and small studios. Do a wide spectrum, because there are hundreds and hundreds of game studios out there. So I don't know that your chances aren't good. I would just say look the entire spectrum, and if possible, do try to get a dialogue with someone so you can ask about like what are the terms of the internship and stuff like that. So yeah, ArtStation, LinkedIn, Creative Heads,
and small studios, a lot of independent studios for sure. Like you're absolutely right. There's like enormous now. That's the chance, because the big studios might be a bit reluctant to hire junior people, but the small studios might even need help. Like the independent studios, they might not pay a lot, or sometimes they don't even pay, but at least you get experience. And I think that's the key thing. Send it to hundreds of places, and if you can get like 1% response, that is a very successful response.
Really valuable going to those events like FMX and chatting to people at the stands. But these aren't normal times, and so yes, there is an extra hurdle where you can't go and meet someone and make a lasting impression. And I would recommend not just putting in all the applications, but perhaps finding out who are the recruiters at that company, who are the artist managers at that company. Send them an email on LinkedIn and reach out and ask for advice, or just get a dialogue going, telling them that you're interested. Are there any roles going? And I think, as with all applications, keep the real, up to date, with the best possible content on it, and make it unique so that people remember it, so it makes a good impression. It's basic stuff. It's basic advice, but I think it stands.
Yeah, what Lucy said, I think LinkedIn, that is become, especially in the COVID time, that's everything. We're doing everything on LinkedIn. All the recruiters I know are, sourcing LinkedIn. And I would say, get active, post your work, get it open, communicate with them actively on LinkedIn. Don't be afraid. Reach out to people. I think there's a miscommunication. Everyone's looking for talent, and talent's looking for work. And it's about just connecting everyone.
Thanks very much. We move on to the next one, which is from Cabell, or Sabel, hopefully I'm saying that right. How do you all cope with anxiety? Has any of you suffered from imposter syndrome, and how do you tackle it?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I have talked a lot about this on my streams and also on my videos. Like I suffer that from that every day, and I think that every day is a struggle. There's a lot of things that we don't talk about on the industry, and I wish that we did, like especially depression and anxiety, and that is such a vivid part of this industry, especially now in COVID-19. And you need to understand that even the most successful artists suffer from that. I consider myself, semi-successful, and I've suffered from depression. I've suffered from anxiety, and the only way that I've personally struggle and try to move on with that is to really get a support around me. I have my wife, which supports me on every way. I speak with her almost every day about everything like that. I speak, of course, with like my close friends, and I have 3 pets. I have 2 dogs and 1 dog and 2 cats, and I play a lot of video games. I do a lot of brainless activities as well, like watching shitty movies and shitty games and things like that. It is important for you to try to back off and try to switch off and try to leave the industry for the weekend or leave the industry for certain hours a day to try to like refresh your mind, And whenever you're feeling anxious, especially now in COVID-19, just call someone, call someone on the phone, call someone on Zoom, go to Skype, go to Zoom, go to Facebook and say, hey, can we have a little chat? Let's talk about this game, or let's talk about this film. And it's important for you to try to put your mind somewhere else so that you don't bring the demons with you and be here alone with them, just looking in your shoulder, And especially now in COVID-19, we're so alone, because back in the day, if we were working late on a project, we would all be in the company, we would all be like there trying to deliver something. But now we're all alone at our houses working remotely. So I know it's so much more difficult, but really try to reach out. Regarding imposter syndrome, I'll be very honest. If I didn't have imposter syndrome, then I think something would be wrong with me, maybe. Because I do think that I think every good artist has that. Every good artist thinks they're shit. Like, of course they do. Like, I think I suck sometimes, but I guess I can get away with it. That's what I try to do, But that happens a lot. And imposter syndrome happens on every senior. I've met people with 30 years old of experience, and they also have the same thing. So don't be afraid that it's not with you. Sorry, what? You don't have it?
No, I really don't.
That's good.
I
That's
get
good.
anxiety, depression.
Yeah.
Don't know how to fight those exactly. I don't have good advice. I've never had the imposter syndrome though. I grew up in an artistic household though. So it was always environmental. So it was always like the norm. So it wasn't ever it wasn't something I was introduced to after I had a set of ideas. It was just always the environment.
Yeah.
So it may be that there was a weird circumstance.
Yeah, that has to do that's definitely the growing up thing for sure. If I had I think if I would have lived on an artistic house, it would have been different. I didn't. My father his thing was like, I need to be an economist. I need to work in accounting because accounting is what I should do because that's good. And he wasn't an accountant, but he thought accountants were important people. And so, Hugo, you need to be an accountant. Obviously that didn't happen. That didn't happen. He never really saw me as an artist because he died when I was 10, but that was his vision, and I think that in some way, that's why I always kind of think, maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe I should be an accountant. Maybe I should be a serious person and have a real job like they usually do. And I think this is an issue with society as well, especially with art. Yeah. Like society doesn't respect artists at all,
I wonder about the imposter part and partially why I grew up, how I grew up with it. I never had a negative voice around it or a judging voice. There wasn't, I never had to go through a tester, basically. It was always just, we're just going to sit and draw and this is a thing and it has outcomes. Where I found it and when I do mentoring, one of the questions I ask around that is like, who was your worst teacher? How bad did they treat you? What type of PTSD are you dealing with? Literally, that you have a ghost tormentor over your shoulder, And it's like, because it took a while into adulthood and talking to other artists to understand that there is kind of a ghost tormentor. And it's like, wow, you should go find that guy and punch him in the throat because that is not a needed thing. Although I do agree with Hugo, I do look at my work. I am never a fan of my work. I always look at it and go, that's garbage. Next one's gonna be fine. But I don't really have the thing where it's like, oh, I'm not really a this and I'm tricking, or I don't really understand the idea. But I didn't. Oh, go ahead, Lucy. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I was just completely the opposite. I remember so vividly sitting there in some shader writing meetings with some very senior, very technical people, talking all this technical language and talking in a way of, I know this, I know that. And I sat there, and that's not the way I've been brought up to speak. And I've seen it so often in the industry that people talk themselves up. And I think it's a competitive industry. And so there's a pressure to be this kind of knowledgeable, artistic, amazing person. And that made me quite uncomfortable at times. And so the advice I'd give to people, if they are experiencing that or they just are not confident in themselves, is, as Hugo said, surround yourself with kind people who will encourage you and build you up. Be mindful of your inner voice, the way you talk to yourself. You might be saying to yourself, I'm lousy at this, I'm not good at this, I'm not as good as that person. When you hear yourself say that, stop yourself and try and find something nice to say to yourself. And I also think perhaps take it a step at a time. It's very, very easy to compare yourself to the most clever person in the room, the most artistic person in the room, the most senior person in the room, but they might have been in the industry for 20 years. And so you can only compare yourself against yourself and take it a step at a time. Keep on pushing yourself as best as you can without burning yourself out, without, not taking care of yourself. And it's your journey. I know that sounds really fluffy, sorry.
Oh, no, it's
No,
not.
actually,
It's not at all. Like, I think it's absolutely in the nail. That's the thing. Like, and people don't talk about this. I'll be honest, Lucy, I've been for 2 months now trying to come up, like, to make a panel about depression and about anxiety. And I always and I've struggled because I can't get any traction or any support or any sponsors to do this event because they're always
On that note,
yeah, because they're like, oh, no, we shouldn't really talk about such a downer thing. No, we shouldn't really talk about because then people are going to complain about certain companies. We can't have companies being washed out on the public thing. But I seriously, for 3 months now, I've been trying to do this panel, and I've given up. I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to just do it on
We're
YouTube.
actually planning a panel. I can find out when. We're doing one on mental health and then one on diversity and
Good.
and a few other things in the next few months. So I'll invite you to that. We've got a few people lined up to talk.
Excellent. Because it's something that no one talks about. No one talks about. Like, the people just talk about, oh, how cool that shot is. Oh my God, that artist is so good. No one talks about the enormous amount of depression that exists on this industry. Like, there's so much. I've met so many people like ready to commit suicide. I've met so many people that are really not in a good place and they need help and they need to talk with people that can help them, and I feel like this is not talked enough for sure,
Can I say something on imposter syndrome too? Like one of the best pieces of advice I got was you don't see everyone's journey. Everyone sees someone amazing and they think they were just born amazing, but it was the path that they took that no one saw the 10,000 hour rule that got them there. And that's what advice I got in art school was, before they got there, they'd made 10,000 bad drawings. So you need to get those 10,000 bad drawings, those 10,000 bad animated shots, whatever it is. You're going to get there. You just need to do all the work that it requires to get there. It's a journey. And that's what you need to remember. No one was just born amazing. Maybe Glenn Keane, but.
Lucy, I wanted to ask, you'd mentioned the competition in the workplace and that feeling. And I've also run into that in studio environments. I tend not to be I find I was like in sports in school. It was a non-thing. I'm like zero competitive, and I have but I always did notice that same thing in like meetings where there would be bluster. It would just be meetings would turn into contests of bluster and demoralizing. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on where do you think that originates? How do you think that comes into it? It seems like a foreign entity when people are endeavoring to make something, suddenly everybody punching each other in the face.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? And I think the root of it is in that drive to succeed and that competitiveness. And when people are fearful, it's going to be more so because, I remember just when I was a kid thinking, oh, why is that person being mean to me? Why are they a bully? They just don't like me. And my mum and dad were always saying to me, oh, no, it's because they aren't happy in themselves. And so when people get like that and they portray those sorts of behaviours, there's probably a root behind it, which is their own lack of self-confidence.
And I guess it could be partially job security as well. Maybe.
Very much.
Yeah, I mean,
how do we explain Michael Bay then?
You don't. That's the thing. Like, he's just singular, an entity in a storm. He's Bayism, yes.
Bayham.
Yes, Bayham. Yes, exactly.
We'll move on to the next question. It's from Sajil, who's asking, any suggestions on coming up with stories to create short films? I got a creative block to come up with stories, and I feel it's a direct result of working in the industry on commercial projects for too long.
I can say that I've been on that struggle many times, Sajal, and in fact, thanks for joining, Sajal. I know him really well, so thank you so much for that. I feel like we should always forget that everything that we do, everything we watch on TV, everything we watch on film, everything we watch on TV shows, on art, on everything, has been one way or the other done somewhere else by someone else, and it is a mixture and an amalgamation of several influences that make anything we watch these days. And I guess it's I'm not talking about copying something. I'm talking about inspirational to create something new when you have a lot of references. And I think if you're a bit stuck on doing a short film, whenever I'm stuck, I just go back to my favorite directors. I go back to my favorite writers. I go back to my favorite musicians and try to see new angles from what they were doing and try to communicate with them. Some of them are dead, of course, so I can't communicate with them. But I try my best to try to get new inspiration and try to make something that would be what they would do together with all my other influences and try to come up with something. It's incredibly difficult to create something new, truly new, because even if you're not influenced directly, maybe someone else has done it already, even if you don't have that knowledge that it was done. So it's much better for you to embrace the fact that everything you're going to do is going to be an amalgamation of hundreds of references and influences that you have as an artist and that your person is. So as long as you're honest and you go back to your favorite people, I think inspiration will come. At least that happens to me. It always comes when I'm on a tough spot. I go back to my Kubrick books and I go back to like my favorite artists. I go back to my favorite albums from Radiohead and I keep like growing and trying to get a bit more inspiration. And it tends to be that suddenly it just clicks and then something comes up and then I try to do that. So always keep that in mind and don't be too stressed about trying to create something brand new because in my opinion, there's no such thing. There's nothing that is actually really brand new in this world of art,
Yeah, I think what you said too was something authentic, something genuine from yourself. Tell the story, your story. Say something authentic from your life and your experiences, and I think that always shines through.
Cool. And okay, we'll move on to the next week for Martin. He's saying he's very early on in his career doing motion design, and he is typically something on the more artsy side, which I guess as typically something more on the artsy side. However, I feel like I'm struggling with creativity. Working off a storyboard is no problem, but the creative side, like in personal projects, is something where he feels like I'm not artsy enough, or like what I'm doing is not of relevance. I feel like a worker, not an artist. I know how to learn a tool, but how do you train on being an artist? So how do you train?
I would suggest for that, I mean, there is the question of the beginning part of anything in being an artist, I think, is daydreaming, is like enhancing your, setting aside time and trying to build habits around daydreaming about things and reconfiguring your thoughts and information and just invention. I'm not sure being artsy is anything more than trying to make manifest things that you've been thinking about or catch your attention. That can even be imitative. You have to know how to play and how to turn play serious. Play is just a form of practice. And if you're having problems that it's not creative enough or artsy enough, I'd say you might want to switch habits, do something different, do something exciting, give yourself a different experience to feed off of, to get you speculating about futures and about other circumstances. Sometimes trying to pigeonhole into a format like being artsy will actually confine and make you stumble because it sets up a comparison that isn't needed. So I would say, I wouldn't worry about being artsy. I'd worry about how much time you're getting to daydream and play, literally play,
I like that advice. That was inspiring. I'm inspired.
Let's hug it out. Come on, Ben. Bring it in.
To add to Paul's comment, which are absolutely on the nose there and very inspirational, Paul, I would add one thing. A lot of times when I struggle with my own creativity, I join forces with someone else. That usually works very well, when I kind of collaborate, like if I'm like, oh man, I can't really do this. I just like kind of, okay, I'm going to contact this guy that I really like and I've worked with him before. Let's see if we can, the both of us, sort it out. And a lot of times breakthroughs come on brainstorming and they come when you're talking with other people. And that's often how at least my personal breakthroughs go through. So just collaborate with other artists that you like and enjoy as well. And if you don't know any right now, man, go to Instagram, go to LinkedIn. There's a lot of them, and I'm sure you can find young artists as well that would love to work with you and work with other things. So collaboration for me has always been an eye-opening for me personally to create something even better. When you have other point of views and other references from other people.
I guess in terms of collaboration, I always get a lot of people who say, "How did you get in touch with so and so?" And I just say, "Well, I just called them up, or I sent them an email."
Yeah.
I remember once, I called the head of Channel 4 because I wanted to do an ident for them for my student project. And they said, "Well, how do you get through?" I said, "Well, I call them up and I say, 'Hello, this is Jahirul Amin. I'd like to speak to so and so.' Find out the name, and they'll go, 'Hang on a second.' And then they'll come back and say, 'He's not in his office right now. Can I take a minute?'" So people are kind of shocked that you can get in touch with people, especially people that you inspire to work with. That's how I work with Paul, essentially. I just send him a message and say, "Hey, Paul."
I find it funny because I always message you. I'm like, "Hey, Jay, do you know anyone who could do this?" So message Jay. That's my advice.
And I'll say from working as a contractor, one of the things I miss about working in studios is there's a guy who I worked with at Warner Brothers who I miss like crazy. His name's Chani, great guy, technical artist, and he's so fun to work with. Very sober, but you throw ideas around. It's great to have people you can work with. It's inspirational and I think it's humbling, where I think a lot of the problem of, again, the competition thing, that Lucy, you kind of hit a thing with me there when you mentioned the meeting thing. The not having competition, the desperate striving for collaboration, or the loneliness involved with it, which there's parts of that I think also dip into the depression discussion. But getting to link minds with somebody over a funness or an interesting piece, it's actually pretty rare, and it becomes, getting to do that will take you far, and you find that there's a thing with dogs, dogs when they play tug of war. When people were training dogs, they used to worry that this made them aggressive, but it doesn't. Tug of war dogs, older dogs will lose intentionally to puppies and vice versa, because they want to play. It isn't that they're trying to win. The fun is in the activity. And, I find that even when you're testing and disagreeing with a colleague who you respect and admire their work, you're just trying to get to synthesis. You're not actually disagreeing. You're just trying to battle each other to weed out the best ideas. And working as a contractor, I do spend a lot of my time alone doing that. And it's something I really desperately miss doing. So when I get offers to, "Hey, mind collaborating or throwing around an idea?" I'm like, yeah, please, yeah. Because it is super fun. It's ideas I wouldn't have come up with in my own idiosyncratic isolation. So yeah, I agree. Find playmates. Get new playmates.
I'll move on to the next question. This is from Nicola.
I love that you said playmates, Paul. That's the thing that really is the thing there. You need to not forget to stop. I've never stopped being a kid in my life, and I think that's the thing. You do have to have a bit of childish in nature in these kind of things. And if you leave all your child behind, you're probably going to have some problems. And I think it's funny that you said play, which is like something playing with someone like we used to do when we were kids. I think sometimes people forget to play, just to play, just to have some fun and just be a kid again. You know what I mean?
So I'll move on to the next question from Nicola, which is, hey guys, what do you reckon is the best and most efficient way to keep yourself up to date as an artist? Tech changes, tools evolve, and it's sometimes difficult to read and look into things after a long day of work.
I think it is. It's really hard to find that time. I always used to find it really hard. I had some really great advice given to me by a CG Soup once, actually for an artist I was supporting, saying build it into your work day. So there's no harm in, say, maybe having an hour 2 times a week, 9 a.m. when people are getting a toast or something when we're back in the office, and just going and carving out some personal development time.
Yeah, I think never have a 0 day. I think that's someone told me is never have a day where you don't do something. I mean, I know people say it's important to shut off every now, but I kind of go, I have to do something every day creative. Every day I have to learn something, whether it's a YouTube video or reading a book, or every day I just do something.
I find that I may be slightly obsessive compulsive. I'm not sure I'm joking about that. After an 8-hour day working commercial stuff, I spend another until however long working on private stuff. I don't seem to know how to shut it off. But I do notice there is a real difference between the types of work that I'm doing. So they both might use the same utensils, but the reasoning and the push behind them is very different. Also, in like Ben mentioned, every night I spend a certain amount of time checking out new software, going through new tactics and techniques. Another thing I like to do is I don't like to completely immerse in art either, but I find that the other things I study, I like history and historical mysteries and neurology. And so if I read about 30 minutes of that, the next thing I know, some art triggers have been hit and new plans and thoughts are coming up. So I'm not sure you actually do shut off. I think there's just different types of feeding. During the day when you're working, it's one type of feed and you can get exhausted with it. So go home and feed the brain centers, with something else, and they also contribute. So I wouldn't partition those things as officially.
No, yeah, I would say that you've really hit something with me here, because I really have no boundaries, unfortunately, and I know that I'm not telling anyone that they should do what I'm doing, because that sometimes doesn't work for me either. But for me, my life, I wake up and I'm doing things. I'm either doing work for someone, or I'm working for myself, or I'm doing a video, or I'm doing a training, or I'm doing something, and then I go to bed. Or in the middle of all this, I might play a game, might watch a film. For me, it's all the same. For me, it's all part of my journey as an artist. So I don't really separate at all, when I'm working or not working, or I'm having fun or not. For me, it's all the same. It's all part of art, and I love films, and I love movies, I love games. I just keep doing all of it. And obviously, this is dangerous because you work too much and you don't switch off. But just like Paul said, I don't want to switch off. I'm happy with not switching off. I'm very happy to just keep doing whatever I want. And of course, obviously, I have huge arguments with my wife about that she thinks I work too much, and sometimes she thinks I should relax. And I've had problems with that with other colleagues and other people that I've met as well. But I can't just do it in a different way. And I feel that some people could also maybe benefit to understand that maybe there isn't as much separation as they think. Because if you're an artist, everything that you do probably will be in some way connected to what you're trying to achieve. So maybe not try to make a line in the sand that hard. You can make a bit of it, but let it bleed a bit, let it blend a bit sometimes as well, because I think it will also make everything easier,
I think that's a good point too. If you're passionate about it, it doesn't feel like work. And I think what you said is, I'm terrible at it too. And my wife gets angry, but when she falls asleep, I'm just going to play with this one little thing. And then that's at 10. And then at 3 a.m., I'm still grinding away on something, but I enjoy it. So, and I guess that's kind of how I relax as well. So maybe I'm crazy.
Yeah, my kids say
there is a thought on that, though, I want to turn over real quick. There is real dangers in this, like physical dangers. I've gone through a couple of spinal cord injuries, one that almost killed me from doing art stuff. It's if you're going to be obsessive about stuff or do other things, get up out of a sitting position, for crying out loud.
Yes.
Seriously, take care of your bodies. Art is incredibly hard on your body. Take care of your body, exercise. Also, exercise helps your artwork. Oxygen to your brain. It helps tie you to your somatosensory system. There's all kinds of ways of connecting to and doing art. sitting in front of the computer has cost me in a couple of ways. And as much as I recommend trying different things and working to your heart's content, shifting one art thing for another, get away from the computer a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you've mentioned that, Ben, Paul. I'm so glad you mentioned that, Paul, because I've had multiple problems, physical and also a lot of very dangerous things as well in my life, and we should really take care of our health, and no one really talks about this. People tend to forget. I have a sciatica back problem with the problem with my discs. They are compressed. I have a sciatica on my leg and on my back as well. And then I have, because of this lovely work, I've developed optical nerve damage on one of my eyes, So obviously the optical nerve damage is producing blurriness on one of my eyes, and it's also affecting my work. And this entire thing, the sciatica and the optical nerve damage, was completely created by the fact that I've been sitting for 20 years. So it's really important for you to do what Paul says. I now extremely force myself to do exercise every day. I have like a bicycle just on the corner there. Every day I do an hour. Obviously I'm doing something else. While I'm bicycling, I'm like watching a movie or playing a game, but I always do an hour every day, regardless what's happening. I always get up every like 45 minutes, which I haven't done on this call, which was a shame. When I, for example, do my streams on Twitch, every 45 minutes I do a break, 5 minutes, and I force everyone on the audience to get up. I like say, you guys have to get up. You need to get up. You need to get up. I keep like bouncing that. And it's so important for you to take care of your health, because when I was 20, I thought I was indestructible. Now I'm 42, not so much. Like I have pains and places that I didn't know existed now, and that will happen to all of you. You're now 20 and you think you're indestructible, but you're not. And you will have optical nerve damage. You will have sciaticas. You will have back pain. Exercise, people. Move around. Walk. Go with your dog. Do bicycle. Do whatever you can,
Cool. Great. We'll move on to the next question from Mohammed. I live in a third world country. We don't have much opportunities here. What is your advice? Should I go to another country to get a job in one of the leading companies in this industry?
That's a tough one. Well, as the American who hasn't lived in America since 2006, the world is changing. Globalization, it affects every industry. I don't know if you need to leave. I mean, the world's changing and people are working remote all the time. But I think that's one of the things. It's become a nomadic industry. I think the UK is better than most places. But again, I lived in Beijing, I lived in Singapore, and now I live in the UK. So I've been chasing the jobs. Yeah. I don't know if that's good advice or bad advice. It's kind of reality.
I think that I obviously none of us here are from like on that situation. I'm in London, you're in the States. Like we're all in places that probably have a lot of more work than probably you. But I would suggest I had to do that, for example. I'm not coming from a third world country, but my country is as close to a third world country as you can get in Europe. I'm from Portugal. Portugal, in the 90s and in the 80s was literally a third world country, and it still is in some respect. It still has huge problems in terms of professionalism, huge problems on work. And every time I tried to work in Portugal when I was still there, this was 15 years ago, I would always not be paid, and I would be screwed over. I would have problems. That's why I left. I left because I had no choice. I could not do my work living on a country like Portugal. And so personally, for me, it worked out really well that I left Portugal. It allowed me to go to Sweden and to go to Britain, and I managed to find better places to work that would pay better. If you do have the opportunity to leave your country, I think you should give it a go. You don't need to leave forever. You can always come back. And at least you should try that. You should go somewhere else and experience another country. I always think people should experience that. I've been on 4 countries so far, 3 countries so far, and I've grown so much because I've done that, And I think if you have the opportunity, and even if you don't have a lot of means right now, it is incredibly cheap to fly these days. It is incredibly cheap. And if you maybe know someone on that country, maybe you can hustle them for a few days until you get your act together. Maybe you can hustle some friends or family. There's always a way, but I would really recommend you leaving your country. If you don't find that there's a working culture or a creative culture that can support you in your country, I do think you should move. I did that Portugal was not supporting me, then I left. And that's it. And I never came back, and I never will come back because I was enough. I was fed up of it. And so if you're fed up of it, and if you don't think there's support for you, I think you should try to go somewhere else, you know?
I've seen so many people, you know, DNeg's very multicultural, and I love that. But I also see people missing their families, and it's really hard. I do think it's something that is just challenging about this industry, that we are so hampered and hamstrung by various tax credits and where work is available. You know, even in first world countries, Australia, if you've got one job based in Sydney and that company finishes its project, you have to move. But I'm really hopeful that following, you know, this pandemic, some of the positives that will come out of it is more remote working. And I see some companies are now able to do that. So I hope in the future, people will have a little bit more freedom about where they live.
Yeah, I'm with Lucy on that. Yeah.
Do you really think that's going to happen, Lucy? Because I don't see that really. Like, I see companies like really, of course, moving remotely. You know, I've been working remotely for 6 years, so this is nothing new for me, but I've seen that on big companies. Yes, they have to do remote because they have to. There's no other way right now. But I've talked with a lot of companies, and I have a feeling that they will want to go back to normal when this is over. And that's unfortunate for me. I feel like, well, it's a shame if they do want to go back to normal, because I wish that we could learn something from this and maybe have a hybrid system or something like that. Do you really think that, Lucy? Like, how is your experience on that?
I think it's going to depend on the company and the constraints they're working to. So, for example, at my company, we have to follow all the tax rules. And so that makes it difficult for us to allow people to be out of the UK for UK working for too long. And it's also going to depend on what the clients insist on. So for some bigger companies, some smaller companies, they're going to be forced to bring people back into the office. Mm-hmm. And it won't necessarily be the visual effects company that's forcing that. It'll be the constraints they have to work to win that work. Mm-hmm. But I'm hopeful. I think the longer this goes on, the longer we're doing remote working, the more normal it will get. And if one company starts doing it, then others will have to compete, which is good.
Yeah.
I think it's funny about the visual effects, just the Marvel thing, because all these requirements were always from that stupid Wolverine movie years ago that leaked. And then it was Marvel's requirements that we couldn't put pictures in emails. It was a closed network until Marvel couldn't get its shots in a pandemic. And then they opened up the doors. I'm like, maybe we can let people work from home.
Yeah. And I think that Lucy also hit on a point there that is, you know, I think in some ways we're talking about the industry as if it's still what it was, and I don't think it is. I think with Unity, Unreal being so in people's hands, Blender, movies, games becoming a blend of things, remote working for some companies, not working for others. I actually think there's a huge amount of invention and pioneering and dissolution going on that is not going to have competitive industries, but parallel industries. And I think a lot of those parallel industries are going to include the advantage being for them having the best remote artists wherever they can grab them, and being able to set up business models around that integrate with old studio systems, new innovations, and so on. So like, I think that there is a lot of hopefulness. I think it's just going to take a little bit for some of the independent groups who are now, like Blue Sky being disbanded the other day. There's all kinds of people on the loose in all kinds of businesses that are closing. They're going to start to coagulate into groups that realize their value, realize they can serve. Like I've done R&D in this past year, especially for this, how to do remote filming, how to use even iPads and things like that to set up cameras and set up kits for remote things that make it easy, quick, fast, efficient. You know, so it's like, I think there's a lot of hope, and I think a lot of it is going into the hands of independent creators and groups starting to go, hey, we've been cut off from this. We don't seem to fit in this framework. Let's build a framework where we actually do fit in and work with these others as well. So I think there is a lot of hope in things. I think it's going to take a little time. I notice some of it's happening incredibly fast because of COVID. but I think it's evolving into several different streams.
I really
I
hope
think we're
so.
seeing
Really,
that with
really hope so.
streaming, though, like with the vendor situation of movies. Back in the day, Marvel film like Avengers would be 1 or 2 visual effects house. Now it's 60 or 70 or 80, and you're seeing all this remote collaboration, and especially exciting things like USD and Omniverse and all these open source technologies. I think that's what you said. I personally am excited about the future of the small boutique company than I am in the bigger conglomerate. And I think Netflix is doing everything in its power to fracture everything as much as possible to have as many vendors for their product as possible. So I think it's really exciting times.
It is, it's incredibly exciting. Yes, it is. But I am maybe I'm the negativist on this group here, but I just, and maybe it's because I've been burned. Like for the 6 years that I worked remotely before the pandemic happened, it was incredibly difficult. My clients didn't want it. My artists didn't want it. It was incredible. Everything, it was a struggle. Every day was a struggle, and no one wanted to work remotely. And I kept forcing. And at some point, some of my clients got used to it, and that was it. And now, of course, with the pandemic, no one cares anymore. But it is. I just see a lot of bad stories out there of people telling me that they are forced to have their webcam on, or they're forced to log in on a certain hour, or I have friends of mine that they've been forced to work on Saturdays because now they're home, they can work more. There's a lot of bad stories going on out there of people having to work more and having to do privacy issues that they didn't have before just because the companies are not trusting them. And I really hope this is temporary, really hope so. And I feel like Ben absolutely is right. The world is, the future of this industry, both games and visual effects, is the small boutique and the small company. The big companies are going to either be left behind, or they're going to have to adapt to the new things coming over, because it's going so fast now. I'm just like a bit negative because I've been seeing so many horror stories from colleagues of mine that contact me on LinkedIn and tell me, I had to do this, I had to work this out, I'm now working 10 hours, I'm now working at Saturday, they forced me to do this, they forced me to do that, and they are in contracts, So there's a lot of bad things going on as well on very big major studios. I'm not going to name any, of course.
But there's more opportunity, though. I mean, that's the thing that, for us, like I worked at Disney and ILM. Yeah. Back in the day, there was just ILM and just Disney.
Of course.
And if you work for Disney, if you want to do animation, you work. Now we have such options, and I think people can make choices now.
But that's the thing, good. Ben. That's what I always answer them. I always tell them, if you're experiencing this from this large company, you should leave. Because why are you doing this? Like, why are you having to suffer through this? I can guarantee you that XYZ company won't do that to you. So I think people also have to take matters into their own hands. If the company is not supporting them, because let's all be honest here, a company is as supportive as you if it is on their interest or on the shareholders' interest to support you. Companies don't really care about you. They say they do, but they don't. They care about the profit and they care about their shareholders, and they try their best to help you. Of course, they try, but you are not their first priority. And so you need to understand that if the company is not treating you well, it is time for you to leave, pack up, and go somewhere else. And just like Ben said, there is thousands of things out there, thousands of companies, thousands of opportunities. You do not have to work on this fancy film from this fancy company to be successful. You can work on another fancy film and another fancy company to do it, So you have to take into your own hands and try to be get the respect you need, and then just move on,
Just related to that topic of, someone's remote working, and this was a question that came in from an artist who says, I'm in the industry since 2007. Actually, it's more about outsource working than remote working. And I've noticed a dramatic shift in outsourcing work to India. And now India is in direct competition with studios opening in India. And because of the huge discrepancy in cost, living exchange rates, et cetera, there's been a drop in quality, but projects don't seem to mind the trade-off for lower quality at a fraction of the cost. Is this something that you're seeing? And that being said, now artists are forced to directly compete with others who can charge a great deal less. What do you think of that? And how do you think that will evolve?
I lived in China, so I mean, this has been going on. I mean, Rocky and Bullwinkle was outsourced to, Mexico. So this is a problem, and it's always, we've been saying it's a race to the bottom for 50 years, and things will always shift. I think back to what we just said, I mean, I've spent 8 years in Asia doing outsourcing, chasing that, and to see it move to Vietnam, to see it move to India. But also, I think, again, with this boutique, I'm seeing things moving back. I see a lot of people want to embrace these technologies, so they don't have to do that 24-hour work cycle. They want to be able to keep those creative decisions close to home. So it's really a matter of priorities of the studio. I mean, I would like to think not all studios just want the cheapest, craziest product, but maybe, you know, we all know some studios do want that. But I think technology will allow studios to take more things back in-house without having to outsource.
Yeah, I don't, you know, I get iffy on looking at the industry as if it is a real cohesive thing that can be defined. Because, for example, it's like, I've for a couple of decades now, I've heard the things about, you know, it's like when all the outsourcing art farms were in the Philippines and Thailand and Vietnam and India and all this stuff. Half of my career has been built on getting the tail end of that work, you know, when it's sent to like a sweatshop house. I've seen some fantastic work coming out of India, you know, so it's like, I don't know that the quality is bad. I worry about the work conditions, just from rumor I've heard, but it's and hours and stuff. But at the same time, like when the quality goes down, a large part of my contract work, maybe 10 years ago, a little bit less here and there, has been like, hey, we sent this to an outsource farm. It was terrible. Can you clean it up? You know, and it's like, oh yeah, I guess so. So there's all kinds of parts to the industry as it is, the entertainment industries, and there's all kinds of roles, and sometimes you have to invent them too. There's a see a need, fill a need principle, I think, that isn't exercised enough. I do think that oftentimes some companies do look for the cheapest end for the low-hanging fruit. And I think they pay the price for it almost inevitably. That always comes and bites them in the back. You know, audiences want quality, awesome things. You know, the power of art is intense, and the power of experience is intense, and people don't want lower quality things. And companies that offer that may go, yeah, we still made a profit of dregs. They are also still looking at their competition and going, oh, these guys did extraordinarily well. So I've noticed that companies do some outsourcing to countries where it's less expensive, and then they also have offices in other countries, and then they coordinate these and so on. So there seems to be a mix and match. I don't think, and I tend, as I say, I have zero competition in me. When I hear artists are in competition, I always find that a puzzling thing, because down to the person, we don't do the same things. Our knowledge bases are different, and our fingerprints are going to be different on our work. Collaboration is something we can do, colleaguery, and also knowing when not to take a job is important, and defer to a neighbor. I don't feel like I'm in competition with any other artist out there, even applying for jobs or otherwise. It's just a question of either finding whether I have to invent the thing I'm going to be a part of, or I'm going to collaborate with a company that has some standards, needs, or whatnot. I don't have enemies or foes or competition. I just need to be able to find the value in what I need to do, and whether that's with a company, whether that's with this framework, that's something that I'm either going to have to be inventive or dependent and collaborative. I don't think the adversarial tribes is a reality. I think it's a feeling, but I don't think it matches up to fact.
As been touched on by some of the guys here, I think at the bottom dollar, it's about the dollar. The company needs to remain profitable. And it's not just about India, us, the West versus India. We've had to move business models around to make sure things stay profitable. So, you know, maybe it was a decade ago, a lot of work moved out of LA because they opened up tax breaks in the UK and in other places. And so a lot of the larger companies will be weighing that up, and they'll have multiple locations, but they still absolutely recognise that, I mean, I'm based in the UK, so thinking about the UK, that there is exceptional talent in London, and we need that experience. And so that need is not going to go away. And I think for us in London, in the UK, I think our challenge for ourselves is to stay competitive. Because, I hear what Paul says about you only, think it's not good to get too drawn into that competitive nature. But when you're trying to think about yourself as an eligible employee, it's really good to stay at the forefront of technology. It's awesome having Ben here, who's with Unity. And I know that DNeg is partnering up with Epic on all the real-time stuff. And that's a huge thing in London at the moment. And I'd really encourage people to focus on things like that, to be able to say, okay, I'm up to date with everything, so that I can be the best I can be and I can get that job.
I think that's an important thing, is embracing new technologies, especially, we worry about outsourcing. No one mentioned machine learning, right? But that's the thing. These are the technologies that are going to create the opportunities of tomorrow. Embracing them. Like, don't be afraid about being replaced by machine learning. Look for opportunities in machine learning so you can be ahead of those technology curves.
I think I heard somewhere said that a guy didn't think the car would take off, so he bought 800 horses because he was going to sell them on. And then when the car took off, he had 800 horses that he could never sell. Something like that. Maybe been 80 horses, 800, could have been 8,000. But yeah, I guess embracing change is a good thing, especially as growing. Last question, we'll make it quick. You got one sentence to answer it, which is from Luis. He's saying, what is one key bit of knowledge you each would say is a must to learn?
Work. There's no substitute for work. It's all effort. There's no magic skill. There's no magic bullet. It's direct correlation of how hard you work. Just work.
It's tough.
One more time on that, Jay. Do you mind?
What is the one bit of key knowledge you each would say is a must to learn?
In what context? Like what exactly? What kind of artist? Because that's really like specific. Like, which part do I need to learn to learn that?
I just had the dumbest dad joke come into my mind.
Oh, I love dad jokes. Bring it.
The only thing that came into it, there's only two kinds of women in this world: good old big ones and big old good ones. That's all you need to know.
Oh my God.
Nonsensical. I have no idea what one thing. I don't think there's one thing. I think everything. Learn everything. I don't think there's a one.
Okay. I'm gonna be then specific since they probably want to know a little bit. Like I don't know if you are a CG artist or a composer or a VFX artist or a designer or whatever, but I'll answer you if you were a VFX artist. Okay. My first answer, yes, you need to learn everything, like Paul said, but maybe start with one of the biggest things I find with artists is that they do not know the world around them. Maybe go and learn photography, because for me, like, I struggle so many times with people not knowing what an f-stop is and what a shutter speed is and what a camera does, and inventing lenses of putting 18.5 on a lens on a computer. Like photography is the base of compositing, lighting, and rendering. And so just think about this. If you're trying to make an image which is photoreal, you need to know photography. It's on the name. The clue is on the name, photorealism. So that's the biggest advice I would give to any VFX artist. Go and really study deeply photography. I'm not meaning like clicking or doing an iPhone photo. Deeply learn photography so that you can know the medium, master it, and then just transfer it into your 3D package or your compositing package. Exactly what you've learned on the physical realm of the world, you know?
And Lucy, did you want to add anything? Or
yeah, I would actually. One of the things that I've started focusing on in the last year or so at work is coaching people. And when you're doing coaching techniques, it's not about giving somebody the answer and directing them in a particular way and telling them what they need to do next. It's asking them and helping them to work out for themselves, what do I need to learn? How do I get to my goal? And so I think my answer would be self-awareness. You've got to look for in yourself. No one else is going to give you that answer, and find out for yourself what you need to do for your next step.
Right.
Long answer, maybe.
No,
Well, I think that's a good answer. I'm changing mine to Lucy's answer.
Yeah, Lucy's smart. Listen to Lucy.
Okay, we'll leave it there. There's a number of questions. I'll copy and paste them down, and we'll see if anyone wants to answer them post this. But I'll say thank you very much, everyone, for your time.
Pleasure.
I know it's Friday night. You've got pubs to go to, I'm sure, and
Pubs? What are you talking about?
Everything else you do on a Friday night. But no, thank you again very much for your time. It's been great, and yeah, we'll be back next week with you, Ben. Right? You're doing a road to real time.
Yep.
And again, we are doing more sessions on mindfulness, coaching, actually, speaking out, finding your voice. I'll kind of post them out soon, but there's a whole bunch of stuff on this kind of topic of just being an artist and developing as a human being in VFX games and animation. So yeah, I'll let you know when that's all out and about. So thanks again, everyone, for attending. And
Thanks. Nice meeting you guys too. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hugo's Desk is fan-funded and only possible by the generosity and support of my Patreons, Twitch subscribers, and YouTube members. If you like my videos, please consider supporting my channel on Patreon or becoming a member on YouTube.